Israel to begin controversial settlement east of Jerusalem, threatening Palestinian state prospects. Trump says he's working to end Russia-Ukraine war, calls it his toughest conflict. And China introduces new K visa to attract young scientific and tech talents. (8 p.m. here in Cairo. Time for the news with me, Al-Hamalawi. Israel's far-right finance minister Bezalel Smotrich said that construction will begin on a long-delayed settlement project east of Jerusalem that would split the West Bank and cut it off from East Jerusalem. He called it a step that would bury the idea of a Palestinian state. Speaking in Ma'ali Udumim, Smotrich said that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and U.S. President Donald Trump agreed to revive the controversial E1 settlement plan, though neither confirmed it. The project was frozen in 2012 and again in 2020 after U.S. and European objections, as it is seen as a major obstacle to any future peace deal. Smotrich vowed to respond to international recognition of a Palestinian state with facts on the ground through new housing and neighborhoods. Palestinians in the West Bank and Jerusalem rejected Israeli far-right Minister Bezalel Smotrich's plan to resume a long-delayed settlement project. They said that it would divide the West Bank and undermine any hope of a Palestinian state. Palestinian authorities called the scheme illegal, with President Mahmoud Abbas' spokesperson labeling it a violation of international law and urging the U.S. to pressure Israel to halt what he called a provocation. Allies and campaign groups warned that resuming construction in Ma'ali Udumim would fragment Palestinian territory and jeopardize internationally backed peace initiatives in the region. Israeli Deputy Foreign Minister Sharon Haskell stated that the establishment of a peaceful, non-Israeli civil administration in Gaza is one of the 5 main points of the Israeli government's plan to end the war. The other key points include the release of the hostages still held in Gaza, the disarmament of Hamas, the complete demilitarization of the Gaza Strip, and Israel maintaining security control.
And so they have shot warning shots to try and prevent them from advancing. And when they risk them.
White House officials told Yedi'ut Ahronot newspaper that U.S. President Donald Trump may visit Israel next month ahead of his planned trip to the United Kingdom. The officials added that Trump's visit to Israel depends on the ceasefire and war-ending talks, noting that there are preliminary plans for the U.S. president's visit, but nothing concrete yet.
Also, I think the European Union is going to put up money too for food.
In Gaza, UN-backed experts warn famine is no longer a looming threat, but a present reality, as relentless conflict, mass displacement, and the collapse of essential services push the population to the brink.
In Gaza, United Nations-backed food security experts warn that the worst-case scenario of famine is unfolding, as relentless conflict, mass displacement, and the near-total collapse of essential services push the population to the brink. Nearly all border crossings remain under heavy restriction. worsening shortages of food, medicine, fuel, and safe drinking water. Hospitals operate with intermittent electricity, sanitation systems are failing, and desalination plants have largely stopped functioning, depriving civilians of clean water. Residents are facing extreme food insecurity, with reports of starvation intensifying across the enclave. UN experts are urging the immediate and massive expansion of aid deliveries, alongside unimpeded access for humanitarian relief. The crisis has drawn strong global condemnation. Foreign ministers from 25 nations, including EU member states, the United Kingdom, Australia, France, Japan, and Spain, have issued a joint plea for a flood of aid into Gaza, warning of unimaginable suffering and describing the obstruction of assistance and the collapse of healthcare as an unfolding genocide. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has expressed horror at the accelerating breakdown of humanitarian conditions, stressing that the international community must act swiftly to stave off famine and protect civilian lives. UN agencies, including the World Food Programme, UNRWA, and UNICEF, continue to press for safe, sustained corridors for relief supplies. The message is clear. Gaza is in the grip of an unprecedented humanitarian emergency. Famine is no longer a distant threat. It is a grim reality. Without immediate, skilled-up aid and guaranteed access, thousands more lives could be lost in the coming weeks, making this a defining moment for global solidarity and urgent action.
And for more analysis, we now move to Muna Mselhi in our newsroom. To you, Muna.
Thank you so much, Hal. And for further analysis, we're joined from Cairo by Al Ahram Managing Editor, Mr. Mohammed Azzedine. Good evening to you, sir, and welcome to Qnews. Let me start by asking you about the consequences of Israel, or the potential consequences of Israel's resuming the E1 settlement projects for the West Bank and East Jerusalem.
Thank you for having me in Qnews today. Of course, this project was planned 20 years ago, and it didn't stop in 2005 when Israel withdrew and the occupation forces withdrew from Gaza, and so it is not new. But what's new is that it is a try to block the to block the road, or like to reach a two-state solution in the UN conference in the next month. So the plans are already there, and we see how fast the things were suggested and the help was suggested to build this new settlement that will completely block the connection between Ramallah and Beit Lahem. And so this means that there is a strong will from Israel's side to not recognize Palestine under any way, and also this is a disrespect for the international law that prohibits building settlements on occupied land. And throughout the 20 years there were plans, but they stopped and came to a halt because of the international pressure. But with the cash flow right now, and with the American support, with the extremist government in the occupied land, it means that the government agrees to this, and that they are not just statements from one of the ministers or a leader of an extremist group. And so this is very dangerous and very negative in the international relations and with the Palestinian cause, and it needs to stop in every way we can in the upcoming days, or with the UN conferences. And there are calls and there are actually stances on this, and on also Netanyahu's statements when he talked about the greater Israel, and they didn't talk about the history.
Now, from your point of view, how would the response be if President Trump confirms support for the E1 plan? And how would that, or what could be the legal implications of that within the international law?
Of course, these statements, just the statements, these are violation of international peace and security. And of course, we talked before that Israel has a small area, and so it is unexpected that America will approve. There are diplomatic point of views that America looks at, but everyone needs to know that the occupation forces and Israel's extremist government get full support from the USA, and so it will be actually difficult. It will be more difficult to face this on the diplomatic level or also on the internal level on the occupied land. Blocking the connections or blocking the road between the borders of the Palestinian country is, a plan to annex these lands, especially that in a very quick meeting the West Bank was agreed to be annexed. And so with the talks going on here and there about the start of a larger operation and new massacres in Gaza, this is looking even more difficult, and I think that the international community will have a huge role in the upcoming stage. And we don't want to forget that Hamas and the Egyptian resistance, there were positive initiatives, and so I think that this extremist statements from the Israeli Prime Minister or Smotrich, it means that there is they're trying to halt any negotiations and make them fail, and to also get humanitarian aid to Gaza and the reconstruction of Gaza after Hamas gave up control in Gaza.
Now, from your point of view, how could such a move provoke wider regional tensions between Israel and the neighboring countries?
Of course, just the statement of the Prime Minister and the massacres that happen, it is almost 700 days of killing civilians, Palestinian civilians, killing women, killing children, the elderly, and occupying the land, and also the destruction of the infrastructure of Gaza. This will negatively affect things, of course, and will have Israel rejected from the other countries, and they will have further plans, and it will also ruin the relationship between USA and lots of the countries in the region, and it will also escalate the tensions in the region completely. And the rejection of an Israeli occupation on Gaza will also increase, and we will also have further requests for a ceasefire and humanitarian aid in Gaza.
Now, what is the requested role from the international actors, including, of course, the EU and the US? What can they do in order to halt or mitigate the project?
The international pressure played a role before in stopping the Israeli settlement projects, even though some still were in progress, and also the policy of displacing the Palestinians from their homes, especially in the West Bank. So I think that it will be more difficult with the current USA government that supports the extremist government in the occupying country Israel, but the international pressure from countries from the European Union countries and also the countries of the Middle East and neighboring countries to Palestine. I think that it plays a role and contributes to halt and mitigate these settlement goals of the Israeli government. And we can't forget that this extremist government they can play a role in halting the settlement project.
Very clear, Mr. Mohammed, and that was Mr. Mohammed Izzeddin, Al Ahram managing editor. We thank you so much for joining us here on Q News. And back to you, Hala, back to Hala Hamalawi in our studios. To you, Hala.
Thank you so much, Mona. Resuming our bulletin, amid Gaza's deepening humanitarian crisis, even its animals are struggling to survive. In the heart of the besieged city, one woman's fight to keep her cats alive has become a quiet battle against starvation.
In a dim apartment in Gaza City, the frail cries of hungry cats echo against the walls. Among them moves 42-year-old Palestinian breeder Rania Murad, her hands tenderly stroking fragile bodies, whose bones press sharply against the thinning skin.
طول فترة الحرب إنه ما حدش سأل الحيوانات إيش بتاكل بسبب سوء التغذية وسوء الرعاية الطبية وغياب الأدوية، وكان اعتمادنا طبعا على الأدوية البشرية، فهذا يعني قد ما حاولنا إنه ننقذ حياتهم بس للأسف من أصل حالات الإنقاذ تقريبا 4 فقدتهم في الجنوب وقطة فقدتها هنا بسبب المجاعة برضه وسوء التغذية.
Before the conflict, her cats thrived on 2 daily meals of canned food. Those days are gone. As supplies vanished, she turned to feeding them scraps from her own family's meals, stretching every grain and morsel. Each day without proper food pushes them closer to collapse.
احنا بنعاني من مشكله كبيره، مشكله اللي هي طعام القطط وطعام الحيوانات وطعام الطيور. طبعا هذه قطه من ضمن الاف القطط اللي بتعاني من سوء التغذيه في قطاع غزه. طبعا وصل فيها الحد انه هي ضعيفه جدا، شعرها ناحل من سوء التغذيه، من قله الاكل، لانه الطعام تبعها مش متوفر في قطاع غزه.
Gaza's health ministry reports more than 230 human deaths from hunger since the war began, numbers disputed by Israel, which blames Hamas for aid shortages. The UN warns relief remains far from adequate. And while the world's focus remains on human survival, the starvation of animals continues, largely unseen, a quiet tragedy unfolding in the shadow of war.
U.S. President Donald Trump affirmed that he is working to end the war between Russia and Ukraine, describing it as the toughest conflict he has ever tried to resolve. Trump said that if his meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska goes well, he will hold talks with Ukrainian President and European leaders. He added that there would be an exchange regarding borders and territories between Russia and Ukraine, threatening to impose sanctions on Russia if no agreement is reached to end the war.
He took a building and what they did to that building, they built a basement under the building. It didn't have a basement.
The Russian Kremlin stressed that it would be a serious mistake to predict the outcome of the high-level talks between Russian and U.S. presidents in Alaska. In remarks carried by Russia's Interfax news agency, the Kremlin said that there are no plans to sign any documents regarding the results of the Russian-American summit. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio stressed the need to acknowledge the importance of discussions on security guarantees in order to achieve peace between Russia and Ukraine. Rubio said that preparations for the Trump-Putin meeting are moving quickly and that they will see what happens tomorrow, noting that Trump wants to determine whether peace can be achieved through his talks with Putin. He expressed optimism about tomorrow's discussions, emphasizing that it is ultimately up to Ukraine and Russia to agree on achieving peace. At least 13 people were wounded in a Ukrainian drone strike on Rostov-on-Don, with 2 in serious condition. The attack damaged several apartment blocks just one day before a planned U.S.-Russia summit on the Ukraine war. Rostov-on-Don authorities have declared a state of emergency following the attack, which caused extensive damage to residential buildings. A local resident reported windows being blown away by the blast. Meanwhile, 3 civilians were wounded in the city of Belgorod near the Ukrainian border, where a video appears to show a drone striking a car. Investigations are underway in both cities. Meanwhile, Russia and Ukraine exchanged 84 prisoners of war each on Thursday, following mediation by the United Arab Emirates, the Russian Defense Ministry said. According to the ministry, all released Russian soldiers are now in Belarus receiving medical and psychological support. The exchange comes amid ongoing tensions between Moscow and Kiev, highlighting continued diplomatic efforts by third parties like the UAE to facilitate humanitarian gestures during the conflict. The European Commission has welcomed U.S. President Donald Trump's support for security guarantees to Ukraine. European Commission spokesperson said that the bloc welcomes Trump's willingness for the U.S. to join allies in providing Ukraine with security guarantees. The remarks follow a virtual meeting hosted by Germany with U.S., European and Ukrainian leaders. The spokesperson also reiterated the EU's rejection of any territorial changes involving Israel and Gaza outside a political agreement after Israeli Minister Bezalel Smotrich announced new settlement plans in the occupied West Bank.
They're putting high pressure on Russia. We have already 18 sanction packages implemented. As we have been saying already in the previous days, we are currently working on a 19th package. Some of the meeting is that it is for Ukraine.
Russian President Vladimir Putin and U.S. President Donald Trump will meet in Alaska on Friday for key talks. Ahead of the Alaska summit, President Putin met top officials in the Kremlin. Kremlin aide Yuri Ushakov said that the talks with Trump will focus on untapped potential in economic ties and prospects for ending the war in Ukraine.
Так или иначе, многие из присутствующих знают, разумеется, в общих чертах, но расскажу поподробнее. Это первое. И второе, рассказать о том, на каком этапе мы находимся с американской администрацией сегодняшней.
China will introduce a new K visa for young scientific and technological talents following a state council decision. The visa aims to attract skilled professionals to the country. Premier Li Qiang signed the decree to amend regulations on foreigners' entries and exits. The new K visa will be available to eligible young scientists and tech experts who must meet specific qualifications and submit supporting documents to relevant authorities. The move reflects China's efforts to strengthen its scientific and technological workforce. The Sea-Watch 5 rescue ship docked in Salerno, Italy on Thursday morning with over 70 migrants rescued from the Mediterranean. Some passengers have been quarantined over suspected smallpox cases. The German charity ship carried migrants rescued in 2 separate operations. Authorities quarantined several people pending test results, with plans to transfer them to specialized centers. The UNHCR data shows that while sea arrivals in Europe fell 24% in 2024, around 200,000 people still made the journey. Tragically, at least 3,500 migrants died or went missing along routes to Italy, Spain, Malta, Greece, and Cyprus. At least 12 people are feared dead after sudden heavy rain triggered a deadly cloud burst in Indian Kashmir's Kishtwar district. Authorities said that the disaster struck Chasoti town, a stop on a popular pilgrimage route, washing away community kitchens set up for pilgrims. The downpour comes just days after floods and a mudslide destroyed a village in Uttarakhand, and the Indian Meteorological Department said that cloudbursts can unleash over 100 millimeters of rain in an hour, often causing deadly flash floods and landslides in the monsoon season. Talks on the first global treaty to curb plastic pollution are nearing collapse in Geneva. Countries are racing to salvage negotiations on a legally binding plastic pollution treaty as talks enter their final hours in Geneva. Diplomats from states pushing for an ambitious deal rejected the latest draft, saying that key provisions on the full life cycle of plastics and health impacts were removed. Oil-producing nations oppose limits on virgin plastic production, while others, including the EU and small island states, demand strict caps and tougher controls. Norway's climate minister said that all sides must be ready to compromise. Heavy rainfall left several parts of Delhi and its adjoining cities waterlogged on Thursday, disrupting traffic and stranding commuters. In Gurugram, vehicles struggled to move through knee-deep water as residents waded through flooded streets. Local residents said that the area has been facing flooding for more than a decade, with drains overflowing each time it rains and no improvement in civic facilities. In central Delhi, rain lashed areas near the India Gate War Memorial, slowing traffic. Authorities have urged residents to avoid non-essential travel as more rainfall is forecast in the coming days. Drone footage on Thursday morning showed red lava streaming from Mount Etna, Italy's most active volcano. The National Institute of Geophysics and Volcanology said that the lava emerged at about 2,900 meters altitude, with no ash emissions or significant seismic changes reported. Rising roughly 10,800 feet above the Sicilian town of Catania, Mount Etna erupts frequently but rarely causes damage. Hong Kong's first panda cubs twins, Jia and Didi, turned 1 on Friday. The cubs' mother, Ying, made history last year as the world's oldest first-time panda mother at 19. Zookeeper, nicknamed Panda Daddy, has cared for the twins daily, feeding and weighing them while sharing their playful moments online with over 125,000 followers. Still bottle-fed, the cubs are starting to explore bamboo leaves. Ocean Park's panda family grew last September with 2 more pandas gifted from Beijing. That brings us to the end of our news bulletin. Here is what we have been covering. Israel to begin controversial settlement east of Jerusalem, threatening Palestinian state prospects. Trump says he is working to end Russia-Ukraine war, calls it his toughest conflict. And China introduces new K visa to attract young scientific and tech talents. This concludes our news bulletin for the hour. Don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at QNewsEG to stay informed. I'm Hala Al-Hamalawi. Thank you very much for watching.